ago, there was a royal family of the Jews called the Hashmonites. You might have heard the name Maccabees.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. So that's another name we give them, Maccabees. And these people, the Maccabees, ruled for about 100 years between the Greek period and the Roman period as independent Jewish kingdom here. The Romans come, they conquer the land. In the beginning, they let these people live, do whatever you want, as long as you pay us taxes. That's what we want, money. At some point, the Maccabees rebel. They don't want to pay such high taxes. Also, the Romans want to start having their army march through Israel. If you look at the map of Europe, Africa, and Asia, Israel is the bridge between the three. So every army would always march through here. Also, the Romans want to put their statues in the Jewish temple. What is the second commandment that we Jews, Christians, and Muslims follow? No idols, exactly, no graven image. And suddenly these Romans come along with their naked Aphrodites and their naked Zeuses, and they want to put it in the Jewish temple. I mean, you can imagine that this is terrible for the Jews. And the Jews rebel, and the Romans get rid of them, kick them out. Now they need a leader. They need a leader who still has connections to Judaism, but isn't really Jewish. So they take this guy, who happens to be the butler of the royal family. Why? Because he's the butler, so he knows what it means to be royal. His name is Antipatris. His son is Herod. He rules for about 6 years, dies. Herod rules for about 45 years, which is a very long time. Okay? And Herod, being the king, decides he will be remembered. He will be the favorite of the Romans, he will be the favorite of the Jews, and the way to be remembered is to build. So he starts building. Now guys, it's very easy when you're the king, you don't have to pay taxes, and you don't have to pay slaves, and they build for you basically, okay? And one of the things that he builds is a proper port. The movie will explain to you, there was no proper port. So he built a port over here. You see that line of houses over there with the palm trees? From there to the left, the port went out to sea and took a sharp turn up ahead in front of us to the north. Okay? Now around the port, people working at the port have to have a city. So what does a city need? It needs a shopping area, right? You get food and things you need. So that was a little bit over there towards those 2 eucalyptus trees over there. Okay? It also needs an entertainment center. Today, we're very lazy about our entertainment. We don't go out to be entertained, we sit at home and download things, right? I know you guys don't believe me, but 15 years ago, we went to this thing called cinemas, okay? And 35 years ago, people went to this thing called theaters, okay? And 2,000 years ago, people went also to theaters, which we're gonna see one, but also to this thing over here, called a hippodrome. A hippodrome is the horses. Hippo is horses, by the way. Circling the horses means a place for the horses to run. That was their entertainment before Brad Pitt made movies. What you did was you would go and look at the horses run around. Very boring life, okay? But that's what you did basically, guys. I mean, today people do it because they want to make money. Yeah. Back then in the Roman Empire, gambling was illegal. But there was a huge, beautiful hippodrome over here. And you can see where today there's a wooden balcony. This is obviously not 2,000 years old, a wooden balcony. But at the time, the Romans also stood near a wooden balcony for the royal family, for Herod and his family. Now, if Herod is a king of this country, and he comes to this city, what does he need as a king? Palace, right? He's not going to stay in everybody's house. So he built himself a palace, which we're standing in over here. We're standing in what's left of the palace. Okay, but this palace had 2 levels to it and had an indoor pool. After you can go to the left if you want to, where those people are standing. You can see he carved a pool into the reef, and the pool was a great place to go swimming. The problem was Herod was insane. Herod was convinced everybody's going to try and kill him. Guess what? He was right. Okay, so maybe he wasn't so. But everybody did indeed try to kill him. The Jews tried to kill him, the Romans tried to kill him, the Persians, which are another people, the Edomites, which are another people. All the people in this area tried to kill Herod the Great all the time. You know what the difference is between being paranoid and being right? If you're paranoid, you survive. If you're right, it means you don't survive. Okay? So that's what happened with Herod the Great, basically. He did indeed survive. He died at 69, which was back then was a really old age, and he died of a disease. But he was convinced everybody's trying to kill him. So much so that out of 21 children he had, he killed 18. Because they were all trying to kill him, even the 2-year-old. Okay? Out of 5 wives, he killed 4. And the sons that survived, he calls them Herod, Herod, and Herod. So that his name will last on. And 2 of these sons are very famous in relation to our trip. I think we can take this off now, yeah. Those two sons are Herod Antipas and Herod Archelaus. The third, by the way, is Herod Philippus in the north, which we'll talk about, but he's not connected so much to our trip. About 30 years after Herod does not succeed in killing all the Jewish boys that were born. Christmas story, right? You with me so far? And about 25 years after he's dead, along comes a guy called John the Baptist. Now at this point we have two sons, Herod Archelaus ruling from Jerusalem, Herod Antipas ruling from here. Even though they're brothers, they're not very nice to each other, and one is having an affair with his brother's wife. Who, by the way, was a cousin. Her name is Herodia. Oh, very, very weird, that family, okay? But along comes Herodia. She poisons her husband, Herod Archelaus, in Jerusalem. And she comes and lives here in the palace with Herod Antipas, the brother. And all is wonderful and terrific in their lives, you know, because they're king and everything's great. But there's a guy walking around near Jerusalem in the desert, baptizing people in the desert, and giving these public speeches. This guy called John the Baptist. John the Baptist, we know him because he baptized, but he also gave lectures and speeches. And one of the lectures he gives, he condemns the terrible queen for poisoning her husband and going to live with her brother. And Herod is terrified about this. You know what they say, the worst thing in the world is bad publicity, right? Okay, that's truthful today, right? Let's think about it. You don't want somebody tweeting that you're having an affair. Terrible. Or that you poisoned, that's even worse. So, what happens with this story is that Herodia has John the Baptist arrested and put in a hole in the ground in the palace in Caesarea. Guys, over there where that group is standing, there's a hole in the ground. It's the only hole in the ground here in this palace. Maybe that's the place where John the Baptist is kept. And she tries to convince her boyfriend, whatever you call him, to kill him. Herod Antipas. And he refuses to kill John the Baptist. He's scared of this guy. He's convinced that there are some magical powers and he should kill him. And years go by and they actually become very good friends. The prisoner and his imprisoner. And a few years later, the daughter of Herodia dances a beautiful dance. Her name is Salome. She dances a dance called the Dance of the Seven Veils. And her father is so impressed, Herod Antipas here. He says, my darling, anything you want, I'll give you. Now guys, if she was a normal teenager, she would say, I want an iPad. I want a new iPhone 6, right? That's what we want. No. She is the granddaughter of Psycho Herod, remember? She is the daughter of the poisoning Herodia, remember? Obviously, she's not okay. What did she say she wants? Head of John the Baptist on a silver platter. And poor Herod Antipas, who meanwhile became friends with John the Baptist, finds himself chopping a head, putting it on a silver platter here in Caesarea. By the way, if you visited in Jordan, they have a palace there. They claim the story happened there. Don't believe them, it's here. Okay? No, I'm kidding. There's a big fight about where it's not clear, but we'll claim that it's here because we're here now. Okay? So guys, what we're looking at now is mostly structures from the 20th century. You see the tower is a mosque. At the beginning of the 20th century, there were all these refugees that were taken asylum here. They built that mosque. We're looking at a hippodrome, a place where horses were raced 2,000 years ago. By the way, did you guys ever hear about the Emperor Adrian? Big Roman emperor. In the year 132, he decides that everybody has to be Roman. Christians have to be killed, Jews have to be killed, Samaritans have to be killed. You can only be Roman. And he brings 10,000 Jews here to the hippodrome and kills them in one day. Horrible guy. Horrible guy. Okay? Luckily he dies also, so don't worry. But this is what happens over here in this hippodrome. We're looking at the palace of Herod where we're standing over here. And guys, from this port, a few other famous stories happened with regards to Christianity. I mentioned on the bus that Peter was brought over here. He converts Cornelius here. This is the first time that a non-Jew joins this new faith that we will later call Christianity. Right? At this point, it didn't have a name yet. So this happens in the book of Acts, chapter 10. From this port, both Peter and Paul at different times sail off to Rome. You guys visited Rome, you know they're endings. Not a very nice ending, but still. So from this port, they both sailed off to Rome. So this is a very important place for Christianity, and yet there's no church. The church is here in the past, it was destroyed. Today it's a national park. Okay? So what we'll do now, one more thing about Christianity that I find very important as an archaeologist to tell you is this stone. Do you guys see that stone standing there?
Yeah.
Guys, whether or not you believe the stories of the Bible and the New Testament, and I think we're all here because we all believe, right? But there are many people who say it's mythology. it's Harry Potter. It doesn't really exist. Okay? It's more likely to find connection to unicorns than you'll find a connection to Jesus. Until you come to Israel and you tour with an archaeologist and you find that this stone has a name on it, and the name is Pontius Pilate. Now, remember the story of Jesus' last few days. Okay, on the Good Friday, as we call it today, we're going to be in Jerusalem, we're going to do the Stations of the Cross, we're going to talk about this again, but the Good Friday, we hear about Pontius Pilate, who's a Roman ambassador, a prefect, if you want the proper name, sitting here in Caesarea. Once a week on Fridays, he goes to Jerusalem to try people. And a very famous trial happens on this Friday we call the Good Friday. So we're going to do that in Jerusalem, we're going to talk about that in Jerusalem, but finding a stone with his name here means this guy existed. If he existed, Jesus existed. If Jesus existed, John existed. And so on and so forth and so on. Okay? So the thing about coming to Israel is really kind of strengthening our belief in this whole story. That's why I love my job. Okay? I get to do this every other week. But I strengthen my belief also. So hopefully you guys will also come with this. Okay? Why don't we take a few minutes if you want to do some pictures, etc. And we're going to meet by that gate up there to go see the very beautiful theater from the Roman period. Okay?
Thank you.
5 minutes. So before we actually talk about the theater, I will want to turn your attention to something else. You notice there's a whole bunch of pillars lying around here, and they're made from different stones. So look at the theater now. It's made from this local stone mined in this area. Very cheap, very easy to mine. Once it sits in the sun, it bakes in the sun basically, and it becomes a very hard stone. Problem with it, and when you get closer, you'll see that over 2,000 years of salt water coming from the sea every now and then, it does get a bit whole. But this is a limestone, very local, simple stone. For Herod, it wasn't good enough. Herod, trying to please the Romans, trying to please the Jews, everything has to be the best of the best. In his opinion, any moment now, the Roman Emperor is going to knock on the door of Caesarea and come visit. As far as the Roman emperors are concerned, no. Why should they? This is a godforsaken corner of the empire. Nobody wants to come visit back then. But Herod builds everything as if this is any moment now the Roman emperor is coming. You'll see it also in Masada and in Jerusalem, etc. So the theater looks like this here now. But when we get closer, you'll see the bottom row is made from a stronger kind of white stone, which also limestone but different, more expensive. And in the bottom area, when we get closer, you'll see it's actually made of marble. just like the pillars around here. Right? So you have grey marble from Italy. This is Carrara marble. This is the same marble that the statue of David, for example, if you remember that very famous statue of Michelangelo, is made from. Okay? You have grey granite, that other grey big pillar. Grey granite, that's brought over from Turkey and North Africa. And red granite you actually can get in Israel. We have it here, but not a lot. He did, however, mine it from an area south of Israel near the Egyptian border. So the fact that he brought all these things here shows how much money and influence Herod the Great had. And again, it's easy to have that money and influence when you don't have to pay your workers because they're slaves, right? I want to take you to this beautiful pillar head. You can see there's a whole different collection of pillar heads over here. This one is made again from Italian marble. This originated from the time of Herod as what we call a Corinthian pillar head. Okay, this is a Corinthian pillar head. That one over there, that one. Basically, Corinthians means flowers and leaves, and it celebrates nature. It celebrates being able to cultivate nature and bring it into our homes. That's what the artists of the Romans felt. Except this pillar overwent conversion to Christianity. Because if you look, somebody ruined the leaves and put crosses here. Okay? This is what I call, you kids probably don't remember this word, but a Kodak moment in history. Okay? You literally captured that moment that we moved from Roman religion to Christianity. In the year 312, Emperor Constantine says, now Christianity is legal. Before it was so illegal that they were killing Christians simply because of their faith. Now Christianity is legal. And by the year 325, the entire Roman Empire is Christian, except for the Jews and Samaritans. They were allowed to maintain their old faith. But anybody else can no longer believe in Zeus and Aphrodite and so on. Everybody has to believe in Jesus, John, God, Holy Spirit, and everything we know. Okay? So this is literally the moment in history where it goes from a culture, beautiful, let's be honest, let's enjoy life kind of tradition to Christianity. I love this pillar head just because of that moment in history. And let's just look at the theater for a second. The structure itself is the same structure that Herod had built 2,000 years ago. When Christianity became a religion of the Roman Empire, it was a very strict religion, and the kind of shows they had here changed. Also the hippodrome changed, because in the hippodrome, for example, just like in the Colosseum in Rome, they had fights, remember? Gladiator wars, etc. It's illegal as Christians to do so. They stopped it, and the theater was abandoned, it wasn't used. In the 7th century, the Muslims conquer all the Middle East, start spreading the word of Islam, and they come here, and in the beginning, Islam is also a religion that forbids performances, etc. What they decide to do is to take apart the theater and use the bricks for building other structures in the area. Now they don't take apart the entire theater, they take apart the seats, okay? And they use them for other structures. Almost 1,000 years later, in the 16th century, another Muslim empire comes here. These are called the Turks, or the Ottomans. You might have heard that name. And even though they're Muslim, they're much more, laid back, lenient, and theater is something they want to have. So they have a structure, they just don't have seats. However, there are all these buildings lying around that nobody needs. So why not take the bricks down from the buildings and put them down as seats? Now, I'm not saying that the same seat went back and forth, but one specific stone, which would have existed on a structure over there, was found being used as a seat over here. That's the stone with the words Pontius Pilate on it. By the way, over there it's a replica, that's why you can touch it, etc. The real one's in the museum. But guys, basically what happened is that Pontius Pilate was used as a seat for, think about it, fat Turkish men watching the theater for years and years and years. They sat literally on Pontius Pilate, okay? And in the 1970s, Israeli archaeologists re-excavated this whole area and they found it there. And of course, as an archaeologist, it's a pleasure to find that stone. I just think it's so ironic that it ends up what was one very important stone for us today and was important 2,000 years ago because it meant if Pontius Pilate lived here, obviously for the Turks somewhere in the middle, it didn't matter. They just needed a nice flat brick to sit on, okay? So that's part of the fun of my job, is finding the things and trying to think where they fit in, okay? So this is the beautiful theater we're looking at today. It's actually used for shows, not in the winter, but in the summer. It's all the time busy with big performances and shows over here.
Wow.
Yeah. So it houses about 3,000 people, more or less. Okay, we have finished our tour of Caesarea. What we'll do now is, we have a very busy day, lots of things we want to catch up on. We have 1 hour drive to our next church. Bananas. We grow bananas in Israel not so much because we eat them. We use the banana leaf to create disposable organic dishes. The Israelis love disposable dishes and they use them a lot, especially the religious ones that on Shabbat won't wash dishes and they don't operate a dishwasher, and they tend to have big families. Let's say the ultra-Orthodox Jews, which we'll see in Jerusalem, they have sometimes 10, 12 kids. So you can imagine that six meals over a weekend of 12 kids, it's a lot of dishes. So they use a lot of disposable plastic dishes, and the government wants to become healthier and better for the environment by creating organic disposable dishes. These are the banana leaves, that's why we're growing them. Lots of them all over the country. In general, Israel grows paste basically. So for these here on the left, they built a few years ago a beautiful mosque. You can see with the dome on the top up there. So these two villages reside very peacefully next to each other. One is Jewish, one is mostly Muslim, but also Christians, and they live very, very peacefully here. We're starting to go inland a bit as we head up. Of mountains. We're making our way to the top south corner of it, where there is a very interesting church dedicated to the story of Elijah. If we look at the book of Kings 1, chapter 18, we hear about Elijah in the time that the kingdom was split into two kingdoms, Israelite and Judea. Here in the north, 10 tribes called the Israelites live under the ruling of a king called Ahab. And Ahab marries a foreign queen called Jezebel. Jezebel wants the Israelites to worship God Baal, who is a foreign god. And Elijah is called by our God to come and prove that there is only one God and that they should worship him and not believe all these little stories about other gods. He performs a miracle in the valley behind this mountain, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then, for the fear of Jezebel, who vows to kill him, he goes to hide in a cave in the mountain. There are about 20 caves in the mountain here, all believed to be of Elijah's cave. We're going to visit one area where it's not so much the cave, but rather the view of the valley where the miracle happened. And a church was already built here in the 4th century, destroyed, and a new one in the 19th century, which is the one we're going to see. And it's a really wonderful place. Hopefully we'll get there. Don't know what happened with the traffic, but we should be getting there soon. You'll notice around us there are lots of different trees. So for example, now on the left, these are olive trees. kind of silvery grayish leaves to them. On the right, these pines, they're not local Israeli pines, but rather they were planted here by different groups for different reasons. We'll mention that a little later. The poppy flowers, you can see the red flowers are blooming now. This is the time of year. And the white tree is the almond tree. Also, this time of year, they all bloom. So it's actually middle of winter and cold and rainy, but you came in a beautiful time because everything is blooming now in the winter here. We're basically on the mountain until we head to Tiberias. So other than this church and another church we're going to visit, at the top of the mountain on the other side is also an area dedicated to the Baha'i faith. I'll mention that later today when we get closer. The world center is there. There is a city called Haifa in which the Baha'i faith place is located, and we'll talk about Haifa also a bit later. But the most famous people who live up here are the Druze. Druze are a religion that was created about 1,000 years ago, and it's a closed religion, meaning that you can't convert or marry or join the Druze faith. And we estimate that there's probably about 1 million of them left in the world today. 120,000 here in Israel, mostly Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan. Also, there are some in England, some in the United Kingdom, United States, but in general, these 4 countries here, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Israel, are the ones they live in the most. Druze do not have an ambition to have independence, to control a country of their own. Rather, they vow loyalty to whoever is in charge in the country they live in. And that loyalty is expressed in serving in the army, for example, joining politics, being involved in politics, and so on. It's a religion that most of it is secret, but we do know some things about it. Number one we know is that they very much value Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, Elijah, and Jethro. Jethro, you know Jethro from the Bible, was the father-in-law of Moses. You know, we monotheistic faiths, we have very little information about Jethro. He was the father-in-law of Moses. He helped Moses in the desert. There isn't much about him in the Old Testament, but in the Druze faith, he is very, very valued, very important, and he's one of their most important prophets. And the Druze came to live here on top of the mountains when they were persecuted during the 11th century, because it was a new religion. New religions tend to get persecuted all over, always. And that's what happened over here. They were persecuted and they came to live literally in places nobody wanted to live up on the mountain. How do we know somebody is a Druze? Well, they will speak Hebrew, English, Arabic. In Lebanon, for example, they also speak French. But the religious Druze, they dress in a more religious way. So it's usually black dress or black outfit for the men, and a white head cover. For the women, like a shawl or scarf, and for the men, like a little hat on their heads. The men also tend to grow a mustache, no beard, just mustache. And they wear trousers that are slightly baggy trousers, so hopefully I'll be able to point them out to you somewhere around here. The Druze believe in reincarnation very strongly. They all have stories about themselves or relatives that were reincarnated, and it's one of their main aspects of the religion. Again, most of the religion is secret. I'm telling you only what I know, which is just a tiny bit. But it's very important for them, the issue of reincarnation over here. So we're going to be driving through the Druze village, and after our visit to this next church, we're actually going to have lunch in a Druze area. Okay? The food is very good. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. I think it's nice, even just a few sentences to get us into the story of this place.
Yeah.
So we're actually just above the valley, or what's known as the Jezreel Valley, where Ahab killed the foreign priests. But we'll just start with the story of God talking to Elijah No, not Ahab, sorry. Elijah killed the foreign priest. Elijah and tell him to come to Ahab. So it's this one, chapter 18. You can start, and whenever you want to finish, you can finish.
Chapter 18. Time went by, and in the 3rd year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Go show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain upon the land. So he went to show himself to Ahab. On this time, the famine in Samaria was at its height, and Ahab summoned Obadiah, the comptroller of his household, a devoted worshipper of the Lord. When Jezebel massacred the prophets of the Lord, he had taken 100 of them and hidden them in caves, 50 by 50, giving them food and drink to keep them alive. Ahab said to Obadiah, let us go through the land, both of us, to every spring and gully, if we can find enough grass that may keep the horses and mules alive, and lose none of the cattle. They divided the land between them of their sons, Ahab going one way by himself and Obadiah the other.
You can continue reading if you want afterwards on the bus. So, like I mentioned before, we're really literally living the Bible on our trip, visiting all these sites. And specifically, this site isn't the site where Elijah was, but it was in the valley underneath us. I am hoping that we will get a bit of a view. We'll afterwards climb up to the roof here, because then you get a great view of the valley, and we'll drive through the valley later, and I'll point it out again. It's just being here where God speaks to Elijah, I think is so important. So this church you're looking at is very new, built in the end of the 19th century, and it belongs to an order of monks called the Carmelite monks. This is an order that you will only find in Israel, Carmelites, and they're representative in the Vatican. It's usually the opposite. Orders sit in Rome and they have representatives in Israel. But here they are specific to Israel because they are Carmelites, meaning Mount Karmel. Okay? This place over here. So there's a small church which I'm going to see if we can get into. I must be honest, it's not a very special or beautiful church. There are much prettier churches we're going to see on this tour. And it's very tiny, this chapel. The main thing here is two. One, the roof, which hopefully we'll get some of the view. And two, this statue over here. Guys, this statue over here is the second statue. The first one was bought back in the 1930s. It was given as a donation from a Christian group in Europe. But when it came by boat, the British actually stopped and checked it, convinced that they were smuggling weapons in the statue, and broke it. The first statue was broken. So this second statue now stands over here, and look at Elijah, look at his face, look at that fury, the anger in him, okay? When he knows what he has to do. And this place in Arabic is called Mukhaka. Mukhaka means the burning, okay? Elijah with fire proves the existence of God. The burning of the make-believe other gods, Baal and so on. Okay? What we'll do is we'll go through the shop if you want to go up to the roof. And I'll also ask them about the church. And over here is the mountainside where we came from, at the beginning of the Karmel that I spoke on the way. It's a pity about the view. But anyway. Okay, you guys want to wait and see the church in a few minutes? Okay, so if you want to take pictures, I don't know. Maybe we can take a picture with Elijah in the background.
Yeah.
I can take a picture of all of you.
Sì.
A little later to the people of Israel, he says, until when are you going to dance in two weddings? You know that sentence? When are you going to have the cake and leave it full? Okay? You can't have both ways. It's not that Elijah doesn't want people to believe in Baal. He doesn't care what others do if they believe in other gods. He just doesn't think it's right to worship God and to worship idols, to worship foreign gods. And that's what he's trying to say here at the end of the day. It's not just, oh, you have to go my way or no way. It's just you have to choose a way and stick to it. And that's one of the things I always remember about this church. I always remember it for some reason when I leave. Don't know why. Okay, so we're heading out of the church. We're gonna have a nice quick lunch break very close by. This is a place we've used, and it's very clean and it's very quick and easy. Local food. Basically, you go and you choose if you want. The word is believed to be the beautiful, Haifa in Hebrew, Haifa, but there is also a older name, Haifa, that dates back to the 19th century when people started coming to live here. The majority of the city was actually built up in the 20th century, in the 1920s, when the British decided to build a harbor here and have commodities come through the city of Israel. So you have Nahariya, and on good days you can actually see the border of Lebanon. I'm afraid I don't think we could. And behind that is Lebanon. So we're very close to the border with Lebanon.
Lebanon border
Now, Lebanese border, yes.
Oh.
So I will lead you down now just to show you the entrance to the gardens. Follow me.
can't talk. I can talk.
I think it's 2 o'clock now. So basically the church is closed, and one of the things that we find tour guides is that they don't always do what they say, and they don't always say what they do. But it doesn't really matter because we're here. We're at a point where, according to some tradition, there is a cave underneath this church. By the way, if you went to the church, you could go down to the crypt, to the cave. But according to some tradition, this cave is where Elijah hid when he was running away from Jezebel. Remember? We were on the other side of the mountain, the Muhakan, what happened there. I love this store, specifically now, because just a month ago, what did we celebrate? Christmas. And one of the most famous stories of Christmas, I think we all grew up on, is of course the story of the three Magi walking through the desert and a star shines above them. And Stella Maris is interpreted in several ways. It could be also the star of the sea, meaning a guide, or if you want, a light tower in a way. And this is a place where there was a light tower guiding ships at some point in history. Or it could also be, in general, if you want to be a little more spiritual, a light to guide us through life, as it guided the Magi through the desert. And I think in a way, you know, this picture is kind of funny, because what is Jesus if not the light himself? That's the way I see it, at least. And I think that's very special about this place. And this is not Joseph, but rather it would be Elijah. Okay? Yeah. If you look at the miracles that we read that Elijah performs, again, I go back to the first book of Kings, so a little bit before chapter, more I'd say chapter 15, I think 15, 16, where he's already performing some miracles, and later on there is a story of a resurrection of a child, which we can connect to Jerusalem, remember, with the resurrection of Lazarus, for example. Okay? That's something that's very interesting. Or Elijah being in the desert and having no one to talk to but himself and God. God sent him to, and to be connected to Jericho, where you will visit this week, and you will see in Jericho mountain stations where Jesus is mentioned. So in a way there's a lot of connection, and some say that Jesus is the fulfillment of what Elijah could have really been as a prophet. Maybe Elijah foresees the coming of Jesus. In a way. What we'll do now, I'd like to take you just to the edge for a view. Just a few words about what else we see. This is a new monastery, by the way. It was built relatively late, 1826 is when they built this. But just a few years before, a very famous French guy comes here. And what's left is just this cross and a metal plate here. Not the French guy. Who's the French guy? Short, funny hat. Napoleon, very good Napoleon guy. So not many people know this. Napoleon actually managed to conquer most of the world. People don't know this, really. Except he didn't come from Europe in the north like you would think. He first went to Africa, conquered some of North Africa, Egypt, and came from the south, which is quite unusual. A little further to the north from here is a city called Acre, Crusader city, where when Napoleon came there, he was actually defeated by the local Muslim leader, Al-Jazar, which means the butcher. You can imagine what it means about what he did to Napoleon's soldiers. And he had to recede. Napoleon comes from Tel Aviv area, from Joppa, just like we did, or just like Peter did, if you remember, to this area. Along the way, his soldiers become very sick, and he leaves them sick with the plague in different stations. He leaves some of them here. Before this monastery existed, it was small buildings here, and he left the soldiers here. And when he comes back, humiliated about his defeat, what do you think the soldiers do to him? Remember, this leader left them to die sick, and now he's back. What do you think they would do to him?
Kill him.
You'd think they'd kill him. They come up to good old Napoleon and give him a nice big hug. Do you know why?
Because
they had the plague. Yeah. It's infectious. No, I'm not, don't worry. But guys, think about it. What the soldiers did to Napoleon. I mean, it's incredible. It's really, really clever. And as we know, of course, Napoleon didn't die in Israel. He didn't get killed. He died much later on in the island of St. Helena. But still, Napoleon was here. Not many people know that. And all that's left is a little plaque here to commemorate what happened with his soldiers over here, the ones that did indeed perish here. Later on in the 1930s and 40s, this building was built by the British Army. You can see there's a radar. This radar is used today by the Israeli intelligence and the Navy, but there wasn't radar back in the time that the British controlled here. After the Holocaust, you all know about the Holocaust. So from 1946 onwards, ships of refugees were coming to Israel. The British had a limit on how many Jews they're allowed to get into the country. Because remember, they also had to please the local Arabs. You can't just let millions of Jews pour in. So they were all the time under pressure between the two groups. And they had a limit. And the radar was detecting to see illegal immigrant ships. Very much like what's happening today, unfortunately, in Europe, in a sense. Illegal immigrant ships were coming down this area, and the radar was detecting them. And there was an underground movement that had enough of these ships being stopped and blew up the radar over here. One monk that lived in this church, in the monastery, was convinced that the attack was to the monastery. And he went and hid. You know where he went and hid? According to the tradition, in the crypt. It's the safest place. In the cave where Elijah hid from Jezebel. So I'm not saying that the Israeli underground fighters are Jezebel, but I just think it's very interesting in that sense. Why don't we take a few minutes to wander around this beautiful out view over here if you want, and then we'll start heading back. Okay? That Nishi's doing. But also, every now and then, the army calls him in for a day of exams, mental and physical exams. And according to that, you get a grade. When you finish high school, 18, 18 and a half, 19, doesn't matter. You finish high school, you go into the army. As a boy, you will go for 3 years. Okay? And that grade is established before in order not to waste time. That's the whole idea. So, you could be a combat fighter, or you could be a pilot, or you could, you know, if so, I don't know, physical problems, or you have pacifistic issues about serving in the military, you could do something like working in a hospital, or teaching kids in school, or just being a secretary to a commander somewhere, or selling chocolates to the other soldiers in the shop. Okay? So everybody does something. No matter what the situation is, everybody does something. That's part of the army. And the army looks at someone like Nishi and says, well, you know what, Nishi's brilliant, right? So he's got his high school diploma and everything, but some kids don't get their high school diploma yet. The army will help them complete that. The army will help you get your driving license if you didn't get it yet. Just before you finish your army, even if you never plan on going back to school again, the army says, we're going to give you SAT exams to prepare you for university. We're also going to pay for 1 year of university studies, wherever you go, whether it's in Israel or in another country, it doesn't matter. Okay? That's a lot of help from the army. Most Israelis, when they finish their military service, will go away for 6 months to a year. We call it a gap year. It's very typical. A lot of them actually go to visit New Zealand and India. India's big with Israelis. It's mostly getting away, clearing your head, etc. And then they come back. By the time they go into university, they're like 23, 24. It's very late compared to the world. Right? Can you imagine just starting university at 24? You probably have already a degree, if not two, or...
I've been teaching for 4 years.
Okay, see, so...
And
wow.
she's a teacher.
Wow, so, yeah. But I started university at 24 also, and, you know, I've done many things since, but it's definitely late compared to my cousins in England or friends I have in other countries and so on. But it's a different mindset, because by the time you're 24, you know more what you want to do. So you're more... They tend to commit better to studies, Israelis. We also do reserves, which means that the army can call us in up to 1 month a year to retrain, to regroup, to prepare if they need, if there's a war, God forbid, etc. Reserves are usually the ones get called in. And people do reserves, boys till 47, more or less, women till they get married, unless they volunteer, to continue. And that's it. That's basically when it comes to the Israeli army. Okay, so what you have underneath us, this is part of the base. This whole structure underneath us is part of the radar base, are 18, 19, 20-year-old kids that are actually supervising the border with Lebanon, the sea, and everything around us. Right? You don't see them today because it's also Saturday, also on weekends. The army tends to send them away. Someone else do their laundry, someone else feeds them for the weekend, meaning the parents. And of course, we put it under the, you know, let the parents see the poor little soldiers. But at the end of the day, it's let someone else do the laundry and the feeding for 2 or 3 days. So soldiers go home quite a lot in Israel, unlike other countries. But if there's a war, if there's a bad situation, etc., they can be away for as long as needed and not see their families. So in Jerusalem, you'll see more, much more. You'll see soldiers all over. And you'll notice they're young, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. Okay? That's just a quick word about the military service in Israel. So who's joining? Nishi's hiding.
Barat.
Yeah. I loved it. I was 5 years in the Israeli Air Force. I was a welfare officer. My job was to go to every soldier's home and interview the family and see if they need financial aid or any. Firas is volunteering to turn the bus twice around the square so you can have a great view. Quick stop on the way into our hotel. Now you can see Tiberias on the right. Okay, the beautiful city of Tiberias. It's named after the Emperor Tiberius. And the person who built this city in the 2nd century is the great-great-grandchild of Herod the Great. You see how everything connects at the end one to another. The great-great-grandchild of Herod the Great was Agrippas, and he decided to build a city and dedicate it to his patron from Rome, the Emperor Tiberius. And he builds this city over here, obviously not the houses you see now, which are quite new, but he builds a small city on the lake shore of the Sea of Galilee. It's a little hard to see, but in front of us is the Sea of Galilee, which isn't a sea, it's a lake. Sorry to disappoint you all, but it is a very interesting lake. I'll talk about it in a minute. So Tiberias was built, but the Jews refused to come and live here. The reason they refused to come and live here is because for years they used to bury their dead, and Jews don't live where you bury, or they don't bury where you live. There's always a separation. And eventually Agrippas approaches a very famous rabbi and asks him to make the city legal. And what the rabbi does is he puts down these bulbs of a plant, and everywhere the plant grows, it means that there is somebody buried. And the city was originally built in between growing plants, very small houses.